Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, we're going to compare the features of Luminar 4 to the features of Luminar AI. Over the past few days, I received two different emails from two different photographers asking me if I could do this video. Both of them own Luminar 4, and they're wondering if it's worth it to upgrade to Luminar AI. All right, let's get started. There's really a lot to cover in this video. First of all, let's start out with what is called the library module in Luminar 4 and is called the catalog module in Luminar AI. In either application, these modules are where you would import your images, and then from there you could give them star ratings, color labels, or pick them in Luminar 4. In Luminar AI, all you can do is give them picks, so you could give it a favorite. Now, for example, in Luminar 4 at the bottom, you'll notice, let's go back to my original image. At the bottom, you'll notice that there's star ratings. There's also a little heart to favorite it, or a little X to reject it. Also, this little drop down right here, we could give it a color label. And you can see that there's keyboard shortcuts 6 through 9 for those corresponding colors. You also could hit the numbers 1 through 5 for the number of stars you want to give it. And if you want to favorite it, you could hit the P key on your keyboard to give it that little heart to pick it. You could unpick it by hitting the U key, or you could reject it by hitting the X key on your keyboard. Now, conversely, when you go over to Luminar AI, you'll see that there's no indication on this loop view of favoriting it at all. To see that, you have to be in grid view. And then when you're in grid view, you can see if I hover over the image, there's a little heart there, so I could favorite it. And that's all you could do. There's no star ratings, no color labels. And those same keyboard shortcuts for favoriting it, unfavoriting it, and rejecting it are the same. P to pick it, U to unpick it, or X to reject it. And those keyboard shortcuts do work when you're in loop view. So if you hit, like right now, this is picked, I think. And if I hit the U key, it unpicks it. You can see over here on the right, like I'll hit pick, and you could see that there's a favorite now. Unpick. All right, I could reject it as well, but I won't. So you can see that the catalog module of Luminar AI is kind of watered down version of the library module of Luminar 4. Now, let's talk about presets. In Luminar 4, they're called looks. So you click on that, and you could have all different types of presets or looks for your image. Those are available in Luminar AI as well, except they're called templates. They also have the added advantage of it uses the AI that's built in Luminar AI to examine the elements that are in a scene, determine what's in the scene, and then recommend a template for that specific image. For instance, for this image, it knows that there's a cat in it. So it's recommending this set of templates called Animal Friends. And you can see that there's, 6 different templates it's recommending in that group. So these presets pretty much are the same. Looks and templates are pretty much the same, except in Luminar AI, you have that advantage of it examining your image and recommending templates for you. Also, if you create your own templates, it will do the same for those. It will use those templates when it recommends, or will recommend those templates when it recognizes elements in the image that you already use that template for, if that made any sense, hopefully. So overall, though, templates and looks are pretty much the same thing. All right, let's go over to the edit panel. And this is where there's kind of a lot of differences involved. We'll go to edit over here. First of all, like tools in general, you have a crop tool, right? And in Luminar 4, the crop tool is available up here at the top. It's also available in the canvas panel. You can see down here at the bottom, crop and rotate. The advantage of having the crop tool up here, though, it's available even when you're in the library module. That crop tool is there. When you're in the edit module, it's still there, but it's also available in the canvas panel. Now, over here in Luminar AI, as far as the crop tool is concerned, you don't have it up at the top. To get to it, you have to go to the Essentials panel, and then it's at the top. It's now called Composition AI. It is the crop tool, but it has that added artificial intelligence built in where it will examine the image and recommend a crop for you if you wanted to by clicking this button. So it could recommend a crop to you based on what's in the image and based on what other photographers have done to a similar image. That is, of course, a crop tool, but it's an enhanced crop tool compared to Luminar 4. Now, in this canvas panel of Luminar 4, which isn't over here, there's no canvas panel in Luminar AI, you'll also see that there's an erase tool and a clone and stamp tool. Those are also available in Luminar AI. They're just in different parts. In the Essentials panel, there is the erase tool. It's the same exact erase tool, although Skylum Software claims that they've improved it in Luminar AI. Now, personally, I haven't used it enough to notice a difference, but that's what they claim. The erase tool in Luminar AI is better than the erase tool in Luminar 4. Now, that clone and stamp tool that, again, is in this canvas panel of Luminar 4 is in Luminar AI. It's under the professional panel, and you'll see it's down here at the bottom. And as far as I know, that's exactly the same as in Luminar 4. Now let's go back up to the Essentials panel of both applications. What you'll find is when you're in Luminar 4, there's 9 different controls here, from light at the top all the way to vignette at the bottom. 2 of these are AI. One is called AI Enhance, and the other one is called AI Structure. If we go over to the Essentials panel of Luminar AI, and we ignore the 2 tools at the top, Composition AI and Erase, and we just look at light down to vignette, you'll find that there's 9 tools, and 2 of them are AI. So it's pretty much identical compared to Luminar 4. They did change names a little bit. For example, if we're in Luminar 4, what you'll see, there's something called Details Enhancer. In Luminar AI, that's simply called Details. In Luminar AI, you'll see there's something called Landscape. In Luminar 4, it's called Landscape Enhancer. And finally, if you're in Luminar 4, you'll see Black and White Conversion. That's the same thing in Luminar AI. It's just called Black and White. So they changed the names of 3 different things. And otherwise, well, they also changed the name, but Enhance AI, Structure AI. In Luminar 4, that was AI Enhance and AI Structure. Okay, so it's pretty much the same thing from those 2 applications. Let's move on to this Creative panel. In the Creative panel in Luminar 4, there's 11 different controls. And of those 11, 2 of them are AI. And if we go over to the Creative panel of Luminar AI, you'll find there's 11 different controls, and 3 of them are AI. Now, one of those 3 that are AI is in Luminar 4, but it's now AI. That is Atmosphere AI. The Atmosphere control is actually in Luminar 4. It's called Fog. So they changed the name of it from Fog to Atmosphere, and they also now call it AI. With it, supposedly, it will examine your image and get depth information, meaning if you have a landscape image, let's say, and you have a foreground element, midground element, and a background element or elements, it will be able to know the depth of all those, and it will better apply atmosphere type adjustments to it. That is fog, layered fog, mist, or haze. Over here in Luminar 4, you just have light fog and dark fog, and it doesn't take into account any depth of the image at all. So hopefully that makes sense. Also, they changed the names of some things. In Luminar 4, what is called Color Styles LUT in Luminar AI is now called Mood. Same exact controls, they just changed the name. Matte in Luminar AI is Matte Look in Luminar 4. And you'll find that, stay here. In Luminar 4, there's something called Texture Overlay. And if we're over here in Luminar AI, it's missing. But it's in the application, it's under local masking. If you click on local masking and you go to the top add, you'll see texture is there. So texture overlay in Luminar 4 is still in Luminar AI. It's under local masking, and it's now called texture. So hopefully that made sense. This is kind of difficult to try to remember where everything is. All right, let's jump down to the portrait panel in each of these applications. A lot of the names have changed here. We have AI Skin Enhancer. First of all, let's kind of give you an overview. We have 4 controls here. 2 of them are AI in Luminar 4, okay? In Luminar AI, you have 4 controls, and 3 of them are AI. But there's a little bit more different than that. First of all, in Luminar 4, we have AI Skin Enhancer. That is the same exact thing as Skin AI in Luminar AI, all right? In Luminar AI, we have Face AI. That is pretty much the same thing as AI Portrait Enhancer in Luminar 4. Now, they did enhance it and make it better in Luminar AI. If we go over and we look at Face AI, you'll see that there's now this different iris tools. Of course, it's all grayed out now because I don't have a person in the shot. It looks for a person's face. But it's going to have some where you could change the iris, add catch lights and things that you could do in Luminar AI that you cannot do in Luminar 4. Those controls aren't there. So AI Portrait Enhancer is now Face AI, and it's enhanced. It's been improved, supposedly. All right, and I think it has, actually. I should say I have used that extensively, and it does work great in Luminar AI. They also added a new AI tool. I mentioned that there's a new one here called Body AI. That's not in Luminar 4 at all. That will, like, I guess you could change the shape of someone's body and tuck in their belly a little bit with that if you feel the need. Now, there is High Key in Luminar AI, and there is High Key in Luminar 4. Now, one thing that is in Luminar 4 is Orton Effect. That's in this portrait panel. You'll see Orton Effect isn't here, but it is still in the program or in the application. If I remember right, it's under the Creative Panel, and it's under Glow. And you go to the drop down, you'll see Orton Effect, Soft and Orton Effect are there. So they just moved. They're no longer in the portrait panel. They're in the creative panel. So that is that. Now let's go to this professional panel of each of the applications. And in Luminar 4, in the professional panel, there are 6 different adjustments. In Luminar AI, in the professional panel, there are 5 different adjustments, and in each, there's no AI in either. Now, they've changed the name of a lot of things. They moved some things around, and this is where I'll do my best to keep this straight because it does get a little bit complicated. Over here, first of all, we have advanced contrast in Luminar 4. That's still in Luminar AI. It's just called super contrast. Same exact thing, all right? They also have the adjustable gradient in Luminar 4. That is missing here, but there is gradients available in Luminar AI. Whenever you mask any adjustments, if you're going to mask, use a masking tool on adjustment by clicking here, you have the option by clicking this drop down of using a radial mask or a gradient mask. So they're still there. It's just under a masking adjustment. That's how you access a gradient. I think probably the gradient tool being, this is my personal opinion, the gradient tool being available on its own is probably a little more powerful than having to use it on individual masks in Luminar AI. So take that for what it's worth. Now, let's see, color enhancer over here. That's the same thing as color harmony. Exactly same thing. It has color contrast, split color warmth, color balance under color harmony. And in color enhancer, it has color contrast, split color warmth, and under advanced settings, it also has color balance. So those are all there as well. Let's see. Oh, photo filter is totally gone. That's just this. I can't find it in Luminar AI. So I think that is one thing that's in Luminar 4 that isn't in Luminar AI. At least I can't find it anywhere. So if anyone knows it's in there, in the comments below, correct me, let me know where that is. Now, I mentioned that clone and stamp tool is now in the professional tab over here. Dodge and burn's the same. So we have dodge and burn in both. And okay, so those are the panels, the differences in the panels and things. And we have optics over here. Let's talk about one more thing. Under optics here, this is where we would do lens distortions and correct for all that. That you see is here. that is also available in the Canvas tab of Luminar 4 under Lens and Geometry. So you'll see under Lens and Geometry, you have defringe and all that there. But we also have all these other controls to correct, like, you know, for verticals not being vertical, horizontals not be horizontal, and all that stuff. It's under the Canvas tab, Lens and Geometry of Luminar 4. That optics part now again is in the advanced or in the professional panel of Luminar AI, but those other controls are back in the essentials panel, and it's in the composition AI section. You can see the transform controls, they call those. I was drawing a blank a second ago, but all those controls are there. They've just been kind of redone. All these controls I'm talking about that are in the Lens and Geometry control in the Canvas panel, all those are there in Luminar 4. They're also in Luminar AI under the Composition AI. So they kind of split this Lens and Geometry control up into two different areas. It's in Composition AI as part of it, and then in the Professional tab, Optics is the other part of it. Now, one big thing that is different and a lot of people are concerned about, and probably rightfully so, are layers. Layers are available in Luminar 4. There's no layers in Luminar AI. For example, I could add a new adjustment layer. All right, now with the new adjustment layer, I could do adjustments just to this, and I could edit the mask so it just affects a specific part of the image if I wanted to. Let's say just the sky. There's no layers at all in Luminar AI, but there is masking. So if you want a control to just affect a certain part, you could do local masking. Click add. You could see on this specific image, I have a basic adjustment, and I have it masked just to affect his eyes. So I'm brightening his eyes up in this image using local masking. So it's not on its own layer, it's on its own local mask. And probably like behind the scenes, there is another layer involved. We just can't access it. Now, one thing, so pretty much the stuff you do with layers in Luminar 4, you could do in Luminar AI just using local masking. You could add up to 10 different local masks. What is kind of, what is missing outright is luminosity mask. For example, here, when I added this adjustment layer in Luminar 4, if I go down here to edit mask, you can see at the bottom is luminosity mask. That is missing. If I go over to my basic adjustments here and I click the drop down, you can see I could still do the brush mask, that's the paint mask, radial mask, or gradient mask, but there is no luminosity mask anymore. So that is missing. Luminosity masking is not anywhere. So, you know, how often you do luminosity masks might determine whether or not you want to upgrade to Luminar AI. All right, I really think I covered everything. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at my notes. I did write some notes because this was kind of difficult to do. All right, let's talk. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. This is important, and I actually did a video on this in the past. Let's go to the Essentials panel of Luminar 4. All right, and let's go to Light. And this actually doesn't, it isn't necessarily a difference between Luminar AI and Luminar 4. It's actually something that I want to make you aware of. All right, and I actually did a video on this. We'll go to the light adjustments of Luminar AI as well. You'll notice we have white balance, and we notice we have profile. Let's go over to Luminar 4. You'll see we just have white balance. The reason for that is not a difference between the two applications. It's whether or not Luminar, either version, can actually read the raw file you're using. This image was shot with a Nikon Z6 II. That raw file is actually not supported yet by Luminar. So if it's a raw file that's not supported by Luminar, what will happen is you won't have profiles here at all. This image was shot with a Nikon Z6. That camera is supported by Luminar, and you'll see we have profiles. So all those profiles that are available in the camera are available here. Also, if you look at white balance, and I do that drop down, you'll see daylight, cloudy, shade, tungsten, fluorescent flash, all that is available in the camera is available here. But because Luminar does not yet support the Nikon Z6 II, it doesn't have profiles, and the white balance just shows as shot. So what it's actually doing and what we're looking at here isn't a rendition of the RAW file itself. It actually pulled the JPEG preview out of the RAW file, and I'm editing that. And that really limits you because the JPEG doesn't have as much dynamic range as the actual RAW file would have, and it doesn't have all the colors, the color depth that the RAW file would have. So it limits you when you're adjusting it. Luminar doesn't warn you about this, so there's no way of knowing it unless you open up that light panel and look right here. Now, if I had the same exact image in Luminar AI, it would be the same exact thing. We'd be missing the profile completely, and this drop down would just show as shot or custom if I did a custom, white balance adjustment. So be aware of that. Hopefully they add RAW support for the Nikon Z6 II and Z7 II. I own both cameras. Hopefully they add RAW support for both those cameras. Then I will be actually working on the RAW file, not on the JPEG preview that is embedded in the RAW file. Also, then when you go to export the image, your export won't be as good as though you're exporting something created from the actual RAW file, a JPEG or a TIFF, whatever you're exporting, created from the RAW file, of course, is better. So I want to make you aware that I actually did do a video on this, but I still get emails on this all the time, and I wanted to mention it. I also talk about it in my free photo editing software guide. You could get this for free. All you need to do is subscribe to my newsletter. You go to my website, onlinephotographytraining.com. On the right-hand panel, there's a subscription box to subscribe to the newsletter. It comes out once a week, every Monday. And in this guide, I cover or I talk about the differences between all these different applications: Capture One, Exposure XX, Lightroom, Luminar AI, On1 Photo Raw, and Photolab 4. So if you're interested in that, in the description below the video, I'll have a link to my website. Just go over in that right-hand column, subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll get an email in a few minutes with a download link to get it. So those hopefully are all the differences between Luminar 4 and Luminar AI. I'm sorry I was so wordy. I'm sorry I got sidetracked a little bit talking about profiles and things like that in my newsletter and all that other stuff. But I hope this helps you better decide whether or not you want to upgrade to Luminar AI. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.